Well, hello everyone. What I'm doing is I've created a video just for part 5 of Lab 1 because the instructions are a little weird, hard to follow. I kind of broke it up. I created a new assignment called Lab 1-5, and that's what I'm walking through. So first thing it tells you to do in the instructions is check to make sure you have Node installed by typing Node tech version. Okay, great, that works. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what version you have. As long as it's recent, it should work no problem. Then you just have to be careful the way you follow the rest of the instructions, because at one point it actually makes a mistake. And I'm going to cover this in class, but the issue is what folder you're in when you're setting the root directory and you're expecting files to be there. Now, the next part of the instructions after checking your Node version was to install Express and Minimus using npm, which is Node Package Manager. I'd already installed them, so what you saw on the screen was just, yep, they're there, nothing needs to be updated. Okay, great. So now what we're doing is we're moving on to the next part of the instructions. Okay, so next thing in the instructions is to go ahead and create a file under your main repo called server.js. You can do it a bunch of different ways, and you see how I do it here. But what you're going to do is after you create that server.js, you copy the text box that's in the assignment description. You'll notice because it's .js, it goes right up to create a JS file extension. Also, you'll notice that when you type something into a file, you don't save it. There's like a little dot up next to the name. So until you hit save, that dot won't go away. So anyway, make sure you have all the stuff that is in that box. Go ahead, hit save. This server.js file is required to run the web server locally on your computer using Node. Okay, so go ahead and make sure you have everything in there copied, and we're going to go down. Now here's the first confusing thing. It says make sure you're in the lab 1 folder, but you're not, because you just created server.js in the ITM 352 repo. So I had the cd into lab 1, and then it tells you to run a specific command. It said node ... server.js. Really what this command is doing, and the whole point of this bullet, is to show that you can, when you execute a command like node and you're telling it where to get the file, that file doesn't have to be in the same directory. The ... says go to the parent directory above me, look for server.js and run it. So this was just kind of like, be aware of where your node.js file is and where you're running it from. Next step is to go ahead and open up a web browser. We have here, paste it in, and instead of just pasting it in, you have to put the name of your HTML file. Mine is sal.html. So go ahead and do that. Go ahead and hit enter. And what you're going to find is that works great. Okay, so what happened here? Well, we're running the server.js file, and we're running it from the lab 1 directory. So that becomes the default directory, the root directory for that web server. So even though the file was located in ITM 352 repo, the fact that it is running, I called the command from lab 1 is what allowed it to execute the command. All right, so the next thing in the instructions is to create a new directory called static. So we're going to go back to VS Code, and we're going to create a directory called static. So where is that static? Well, right now we're in the lab directory. So what you're going to want to do is underneath lab 1, create a folder called static. So that's not very clear in the instructions. That's why I'm telling you, go ahead and do that. And then move your sal or your whatever _hello.html into that static folder. Okay. So that's just this. I'm on a Mac again, so make sure you get permission to move it. That's fine. So now my sal_hello HTML is in the lab1 / static folder. Right, and at this point, basically what you're going to do is answer the question down on the first part. So this is just the instructions. Now go to next, and it says open a browser to that localhost 8080, and then put /static / in between your hello HTML file, And you'll see, hey, it works, okay? So why did it work? Well, it worked because previously the root directory was lab1 because that's where we called the server.js command from. And now we spelled out in the path from the root directory. We don't have to put lab1. It's the root directory plus whatever subfolder and the file name. So even though it's under lab1 static, it's really, because the root directory is lab1, you don't have to put that. It's just static / the name of your file.html. So understanding the root directory is important because you keep that part out of the URL, and that means understanding where you're launching the server.js from. It can get confusing, but I don't want you to get confused, so keep track of that, okay? So this problem this part of part 5, lab 1, part 5, is the problematic part, because if you do what you are told to do here, and let's just do that. In the current directory we are in, which is lab 1, type in node server.js, and then try to set the root directory to a different directory, you're going to have problems. Why? Well, because server.js file does not exist in your current lab 1 folder. But go ahead and type it, because that's what the instructions say. See what happens. It goes, we got issues. There's no server.js file. Right? So the error here is that we really basically just needed to put a / in front of the server.js, and that would have made it work. And that's what we're going to do here in a second. But here's what I'm doing. I'm going to just go back to the ITM repo directory. I'm going to try to run the command from the main repo directory, where basically I'm running server.js that exists there. I'm going to try to set the root directory to .static, /static, okay? So it's going to go ahead and run, and even if there isn't a /static, or even if there is a static directory directly under ITM repo, you're still telling the server to look there. So when I go to the web page and I try to run the program, which is now sal hello is underneath static, it's not going to point to it. We have a problem. So basically what we have to do is we have to make sure we understand where our files are and where our root directory is actually set up and where it's being run from. So just keep that in mind. So simply put, the error on that assignment is that it is not a .. in front of the running of the server.js. Once you go ahead and leaving all the files the way they are, if you are in lab 1, run that, then this part will execute just fine. Okay? So go ahead and type up an answer on why that would work. Because you are setting the root directory to be static, and because you're setting the root directory to be static, then you don't have to have root, you don't have to have static in the URL, because that is where the web server knows to go look for the files that it's supposed to render. Does that make sense? Okay, great. And I'm just typing up some answers here. These instructions are incorrect. Need to run that, then it will work. And why will it work? Because it sets the root directory to be static, which is where our sal_html file is. And now at this point, what does it have you do? Okay, so this might be a little confusing, but basically what we're going to do is we're going to step backwards from the lab 1 folder into the main ITM 352 repo, and then you're going to execute the command node ./server.js. Notice that is not the same thing as ./js. ./server.js executes that JavaScript command, and from the main repo directory, we're setting the root directory to be lab1 static. So now the web server that's running from the main repo directory is expecting any HTML files that are in lab1 static to run, and that's what happens. So basically, this whole 1.5 thing that we're doing, the whole point of it is to get you to understand where you're running your server file from, setting the root directory, what that means, and then being sure you have your files in the correct place for it to properly render and call the file from the right location, because it does dictate what your URL is for when you're trying to pull that file. So hopefully this didn't confuse you too much because of that one error or just the content that's in this. We're going to cover everything I just did here in class. If we haven't already done it, you're watching this later. If you have any questions, please go on Discord, write a note. Myself, the TA, or one of your classmates will help you with understanding what this is. This was kind of unnecessarily difficult. Main point is we have a server, we have a root directory, which is kind of the public HTML place that the web server is supposed to look for files to render when people go to it. You can have subfolders underneath that root directory. Those subfolders just have to be part of the URL. Okay? So let me know if you have any questions and I'll answer them. Thanks. Sorry. What I'm going to write here in the box here in a second is the question is why do you need lab 1 static? So all this program we're doing is when we're running node server.js, we're not setting a root directory. The default root directory, as we have already discussed earlier in this video, the default root directory, unless set otherwise, is going to be the directory where you are executing server.js. So earlier we were in lab 1. We executed // server.js, so the root directory is lab 1. In this part, the directory that we launched server.js was the ITM 352 repo, and that's why you had to add those subfolders into the URL. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut it off early, but that is the answer to this particular question. All right, that's it. See you next time. Bye.